Now I'd like to bring up Jessica Murray, a PhD student here in poetry at UNT, who's going to introduce Katie Peterson for us. So here's Jessica Murray.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. It's my pleasure to introduce poet Katie Peterson. She joins us tonight as UNT's 2014 Rilke Prize winner for her book, The Accounts. Her second collection, Permission, was also published in 2013. Her first collection, This One Tree, won the 2005 New Issues Prize. Peterson is the recipient of numerous residencies and has won many awards for her poetry. She teaches at Tufts University in Massachusetts, where she is professor of the practice of poetry. In the accounts, we see a poet trying to come to terms with her mother's death. Many of the poems are explorations of grief, the way our lives are altered by absence. Argument about appetite opens with an incredible image. When you say, "Imagine yourself in a safe green place, I lie on her grave, looking up at the inscription in the monument where my father's date will go." We are moved by the speaker's response, for her place of safety is the monument to her mother's absence. There are no more safe places. Peterson has said that losing her mother was like losing a beautiful way of understanding, a most fantastic philosophy. And the mother she turns her gaze on emerges as a beautiful, sometimes contrary presence. For example, as in the garden. It was like this. She wanted the garden, but she didn't want the garden. A narrative of progress. When she did well, she got a bed by the wall, not the window. By the door where visitors came, not the window that looked onto the garden. Yet, as the title of Peterson's collection suggests, these poems are not only or always about grief. They are accounts of family, love, and memory. The way events often contain multiple and sometimes conflicting accounts. They ask the question of worth. Finally, the poems here insist that knowledge gained and ideas explored are also forms of love. This exploration can be seen in the poem From the Nest. Mostly, I forgot who made me, but I remember being made. Just as I remember my hollow assembled, the pressure of having to hold. I have been told I began as an idea. The materials do not agree. I am not woven, but lashed together, not fine, not even. And my fray, my lilting to the left, makes me best for the place I was placed. Added to, I changed. In Snake, the final poem of the accounts, Peterson combines the physical act of chasing a snake out of the house with the question of why she is afraid of it in the first place. Her attempt to answer can be seen as the poet returning to the book's questions of grief and absence. Nothing organized that fear. Seeing the edges, it found its way out. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Katie Peterson.
Spring. I have been trying to read King Lear. End up drinking red wine and talking about the tropics. Thought there might be a poem in the play. Maybe the way he talks about the button on his coat before he dies standing carrying the body of the hanged. Maybe the part where she refuses to bargain and the maps on the table are redrawn. I am sleeping. Elsewhere, you are finishing Tess of the D'Urbervilles, those last chapters, before they end up at Stonehenge. An angel says to Tess, "Sleepy, my dear, I think you are lying on the altar." The part where the book lets them hold each other without sleepwalking or lies. Angel has traded in his harp for a tin kettle and bread. They picnic in a damask-curtained bed, a fugitive and an accomplice. I may be turning toward the branch of apple blossom bearing its burden of the raindrops in an even more buoyant aspect than the night before. Now you are the caretaker, finding Tess's fine silk stockings draped on the damask coverlet in the house they squat in, giving both of them away. The tree in the side yard, not yet in the kind of flower to release it and uncover it again. Everything, everything, and before everything, the possibility of something else. The moment when a moral gets minced by an account a body makes of any other body, and time takes place instead of taking time. Cordelia, with the armies of her husband, scouring the unharvested corn of her homeland for her naked, wandering, delusional father. Tess at the dairy, good at her job. Angel in the field, his fingers on the strings of his harp. You carrying me into a lake in August, the summer my mother left the earth. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Bruce and Corey, and thank you, University of North Texas, for this Rilke Prize. I wanted to say one thing about Rilke, the Bohemian poet, a great generous spirit who's given his name to this prize, and it has to do with his poem, Requiem for a Friend, many of the lines of which I have loved for a really long time, and I wanted to just read a few of them to you to say, thank you, Rilke. These are the first lines of the poem. I have my dead, and I have let them go, and was amazed to see them so contented, so at home in being dead, so cheerful, so unlike their reputation. It's very rare that we think of Rilke as a funny poet. I think these lines are kind of funny. And though this book was written on the occasion of a death, my mother's death, the book is really for the living, as all mourning really is for the living. And a number of the poems I read tonight, in fact, probably all of them are going to have to do with this sense of disorientation or being dislocated from home that mourning gave me. The next poem is called Argument About Heaven. And there are a number of poems in the book that have this name, Argument, and they're written in a form I developed in which two poems kind of speak in sequence with each other. I call it an argument because it has two sides, but they're not necessarily two sides of the same argument. Argument about heaven. As a child, I was taken to look at a mountain every year in the summer. I was only willing to say, nothing terrifying happens to the good. The lookout road opened when the snowpack melted late in the season. Others have argued for green fields. Every year, my father pointed to the mountain. I couldn't see that far, meaning, I suppose, I didn't want to. His finger traced a rivulet toward a source high in a crease where two mountains met. His thumbprint on the site where he had camped. When others speak of green fields, I get sick. A map etched in metal with the names of all the mountains in the range and a line of ridge representing the crest. We leaned against that. Fantasies I've tried recently to kill. Happy family, heaven. I like to trace that ridge with my ring finger on my left hand, the one I wrote with, and then do the same in the air across the original. Later in the car, with my eyes shut, I tried again on the window as we drove across the bay. Shouldn't goodness be rewarded with the absence of terror? We went to fish, not to climb. At Dead Man Creek, my father baited his hook while half a dozen sucked the blood from his hand. But I have seen the shape green fields make in the eye, like a casino in a small town. One year we didn't have time to go to the mountain. That morning, we had fished a lake for nothing. The night before, we played poker, but the children wanted to make everything wild. Too many wild cards kill the competition. The adults becoming frustrated with the children playing their games, though it would be wrong to say we had no regard for rules. I begged to see the mountain, but it is punishment that governs the field. That meant I asked once on behalf of someone else, but experienced my own disappointment. You're not a farmer. The field doesn't pay for you. You pay for the field. The mountain isn't a bottomless well. You know you have to pay your tribute. The good breathes so deeply, it is like eating. Your tribute is your presence, the coinage of your person, those from whom the burden has been lifted. Though the country you drive through is beautiful, with a range of blues, the envy of the Netherlands, their hands rest at their sides, it is not the mountain. And you can live like that. Earth. I didn't come here to make speeches. I didn't come here to make trouble. I didn't come here to be somebody's mother. I didn't come here to make friends. I didn't come here to teach. I didn't come here to drag the space heater from the house in summer with an extension cord out to the orchard because the peach trees we planted in a climate that couldn't take them didn't thrive, couldn't sweeten their fruit in a place like this. This is another poem in that same form. Argument about the beginning. And it's one of a number of poems in the first section of the book where I'm trying to write a creation myth about the moment, almost the moment before creation. The birth of a daughter, the loneliness, the absence, the vacancy, the illness, is different from the birth of a son. Ask the womb, where the tree was. Ask the forceps. The anesthetic becomes a circle of light. Ask the army. And it's not so bad. It's not like a field of husbands in the waiting room after the crops are cut. Degrees of happiness are a ludicrous way. New growth, a garden of understanding happiness, of lettuces or a garden for the eye. But it is the only way, I think, planted with perennials. Remember how the world was made? Even to leave the circle bare, a form of worshiping the sun, to give the sun that circle completely, to deed that circle to the sun by dividing. A place is not what it is, sky from the waters. A place is what it makes possible. It is not revealed in the account. The grass dies, but the sun thrives, for example. But I bet God loved the waters, for example, a clearing in a forest for a house, more than he loved the tide pulling out what he separated them from. One of the senses I had in the years right after my mother died was of being a perpetual guest. And the next poem is about going to visit my brother and his wife in a house they were living in. And if you can imagine it, you have to imagine like being a guest and being trapped in a physical space, like hearing two people having an argument and having there be basically two options. Like, you either go in and interrupt their argument or you pretend like they're not there. It's like one of these like nightmare scenarios of being a guest. Enough. So many forget-me-nots with their white centers, scattered, you'd say, if there weren't so many everywhere, as many as the stars last night in between the branches, above the porch, behind the house. Was it an argument, or were there just things they had to say? I could have faith in so many creatures. The old setter from the neighbor yard who follows me around the corner and no longer. The chick with its new beak just past breakable, whose lighter top feathers have a bit of flight. Any mother bear. You say things, and the next day, it's like they don't matter. We want our faces to alter, though we don't want to get older. Neither do we want to get younger. Repetition with less knowledge is ridiculous. Just ask the Greeks. You get to keep being a tree, but without the branch that showed the sky your star-like shape? I don't think so. Steadiness can be useful, but my loyalty loves a form that will follow me through changes. At a diagonal, the dark woods on the back slope have enough space to walk between, not enough to hide. He looks into them and writes notes to his mother. She looks into them and finds alignment, or looks for what she wants. She has a human skeleton on her desk. He has a protractor. I had wishes for both of them yesterday, but the weather has become so kindly, so temperate. I forget what blessings they don't think they have. So that poem was a little bit about an evening that's a lot like this evening tonight, an evening kind of at the beginning of spring. And the next one is about an evening like that too. I wanted to just read one poem from this book, my second book, Permission. It's my second book because Corey said it was. And let's see, what might you like to know about this poem? At one point I mentioned a poet, Duncan, and it's the poet Robert Duncan, who, if you haven't read him, I think you should check this guy out because he's pure music. But I like to read at least one poem when I do a reading that's a lot like a night that's like the night we're on. And I think this poem fits the bill. Meditation denying everything. Because it is a pearly evening, I am sitting in a window reading a book I have read before. Branches emphasize their heft and sway over their shadows, some kind of extra firmament, an ear over the earth's ear, extra as language is to prayer. Narratives of elsewhere. In the eye inside my eye, that vision makes when you tell it to, when you shut your eyes so hard they hurt, you get more vista and less twist of road. And then you're looking at a valley you named yourself and irrigated yourself, full of bitterroot, magnolia in the clefts of rock, sage, At last, a harvest, a desert that belongs to you. The trick to renunciation is starting now. The secret of detachment is having already given up, a transcript of speech whose cadences are lost, the human need for a body to fill in all your body's deficiencies, those clefts and dents already given up, the narrative of a life completely altered in the retrospect that knowledge brings, and so discredited the point of memory, utterly lost. That piece of land has always been suitable for a house. That nest has never been ready for 8 baby birds who, top-heavy, frightened their own branch and home and scared themselves completely and remarkably away. Do you hear that? It's the wind negotiating the spine of one leaf. It cannot decide whether to raise a fragment of an inch. Duncan writes, as a reader struggles with a strong sentence, I struggle at certain unmistakable times with what's furtive and most right. When people marry, they finish their names. I am still listening for mine to begin. My spine wants a bicycle to order its work, a red bicycle, a hill into a heart of a city that holds something I want. The pattern of the air around that leaf is like someone tracing my rib cage with his index finger and then walking away. Who can blame us for wanting other worlds? But shall we take them or let them come to us? Is the spirit just an ear more like a mouth that bites the air and turns it into blood? A voice in the next room goes to sleep. Sleep moves in the branches of the oak, become a rootless mass, unsung by skeleton or name or height. My friend who says she does not believe in paradise believes in rest. I believe that. Or more likely, I like to think of her the way she held my name in her small mouth as she held her own name. I like to think of anyone who on a night like this would reach toward my rib cage and trace it delicately and walk away. I'm going to read a couple of poems from the middle section of the accounts. And when I was writing these poems, I decided that I would try to restrict myself just to writing about the 4 days right before my mother died. We brought her home in hospice care, which may be an experience some of you have had or some of you might have in the future. And there are lots of forms in poetry, sonnet and villanelle and all of these, but you can make your own forms. And one way to make your own form is to confine yourself in time and space. And the other thing you might want to know is that the middle section of this book is informed by this image of the nest. And I want to tell you that the nest was real, that there was indeed a nest that was being built by a robin while this was all happening. Foresight. The robin who built this nest gambled with the umbrella. The table tends to rattle, especially when more than two talk at it. But it's understandable. The likelier location, the tree in front of me, an eastern redbud, roots to the left, blooms too heavily on the right, splays from the trunk like an octopus, not a starfish, with an activity not exactly about staying put, not exactly about getting where it should, straight up. Not even hummingbirds with their wings using all the intervals of minutes, every slice smaller, being cut through with another slice, temporary homes in hunger itself, don't source their intoxication from these sweet unbalanced buds, half flower, half unfinished leaf. Not even hummingbirds believe in the tree or have confidence, as I know the green belly of the smallest sweet-seeking bird doesn't get his nectar from that tree. All birds of that kind, and indeed all birds with a mind, seek elsewhere what they seek. The placement of this nest, a gamble, but building the nest wasn't a gamble. The making of the nest started in the mind of the mother, before a place in the world was found. That wasn't wrong. There weren't guarantees. What we call instinct, she called foresight, with no place to put it. What we call composition, she calls design. What we call priorities, she calls instinct, or doesn't call anything at all. Eulogy. Morning. Brilliant light. The arms of the lawn chair and the exhaustion of the eyes. The edges of the yard pin-tucked into place. The root of the orange tree and the earth filled with sweet alyssum hinges on it, like a human hip bending to pick a coin up. My father is writing my mother's eulogy. She isn't dead. Last night was the last night of language. Words had already stopped, days before. But last night it appeared she discovered a new language. In blinks she asked for coffee, then for the first song from the Bill Evans Trio's Waltz for Debbie. Or we asked her, and she said yes. And yes looked like both eyes shut at once. Under the sun umbrella beneath the nest, my father has just finished writing his account of her life. Eloquent but very simple, factual and correct. It does not pander with jokes, as its writer is already liked. Habitual, it shies from anecdote. A perfect wife, she contains sweetness, but not as in sugar in cube form, not formal, but sweet as in honey dissolved in lemon juice for a sick friend with a sore throat. I am also in his speech. I say something that resolves death. The yard fills with sentences now. The yard accepts another hour of closer sunlight. In the speech I say all time is extra. I say we are lucky under palm trees. The imagery that dominates my father's complex diction is that of light. His draft full of tiny crossings out. The mother robin polices the nest with her absence. She hides it. She knows gratitude for safety can't save her. It would be gratitude to a predator for not eating her, and that's only as good as silence. So this book is called The Accounts, and the reason why it's called The Accounts is because I'm one of 5 people in my original nuclear family, and we all had a different story for what happened the year that my mother got sick. And in telling the story, I was really aware of the fact that people have different versions of the story as they tell it. As I started writing these poems about the nest, I wanted to write poems in which the nest itself spoke and had a perspective on what it was talking about. So I'm going to read 4 or 5 poems from a section of poems in the second section of this book called From the Nest, where the nest speaks. And I'm not going to read the numbers, I'm just going to read the poems. From the Nest. To speak through a shut door, to interrupt dreams and turn the sounds the sick mouth makes into prayer, to find a voice that carries beyond where I can see is what I must do. An ocean of stone surrounds the plot of earth I call home. Rafters without roots I take to have been made by human hands. The shade made by hands. A tent to prevent the abundant light from becoming too much. What I am made of whispers, phrase is shed, returns to the ground again. The remains of what I had been gathered from drift through the yard, so gently I imagine enough for many of us. To appreciate the sturdiness of one's own constitution while recognizing the tenderness of the materials one has depended on, this is breath. The hollow I administer must be for lives, I distinguish the dying from the living by their prone position. They are always in bedrooms and often in the afternoon, in the kitchen with the news folded over the forehead or near the screen with a green game going. So more than one dying lives in any dwelling, under any roof, but at times one body lies down with a hard conviction in the midst of others who are kept from that. The pitches of other voices rise when one maker tries to steal the nest of another, and they call this jealousy. I began as a scattering, had twist in me, loft, then a claiming of space, and space's chastened, fairest, headstrong, only daughter placement. Then a spiral, a base that acted like a whirlpool, composed with the consent of water, so that what moved the air and carried me at first had no direction except toward itself, toward a meeting so Mobius it never began or ended. I ended as walls. Most is the breath just before it's let out, or at the moment it could be when the brain apprehends the fact that air could be released. Most of us fall to earth. Many of the creatures whose weight we endure die before we fall, though in some sense this could be a good fate, not to have to hunt, not to kill, to be only killed for as care. I like it here, safe on earth, pushed out of a great height, still fit for use, and since capable of another life, waiting for it. I'm going to read two love poems from the last section of the book. This one's called Confession. A stripe of asphalt keeps the pond at the municipal park in the capital of the state in check. I went there, going and coming from your dying, to watch the ducks. I went there to see a friend. On the way to him, I stopped at an orchard, and pistachios the color of oranges are what I bought. Kindness to those who keep the sweetest secrets, and long life. Now that you are dead, I can tell you, he was not a friend. When we met, I could forget, you would not be. Elsewhere, the orders kept their orders through the fall. I rose from the bed, the spring dismantled. He and I met in secret, and we spoke of how we wanted to die like it was work. Awake, I said, yes, driving him on a road through green fields. Painlessly, he said. Argument about responsibility. The child doesn't remember all the times you took her. She remembers, I spent a night in jail. The time you said you would take her and you didn't. In the Central Valley of California at Christmas time for trying to drive across a bridge. A pattern doesn't get formed under the influence. That's what my sweat smelled like after they put the handcuffs on, by breaking, but by all the times before that, though the breaking makes a C, I saw the greedy winter fingers of almond trees. When I looked back, the officers, a woman and a man, had their hands on my wrists where the cuffs would go. The arrest wasn't fast. Like many before me, I cried responsibility. As they read me my rights, I misunderstood them, talking the whole way. The year of your birth is not negotiable, or knew them at once not to be rights, but some form of introduction. This is called chance, an instruction manual for those on law's other side. A citizen is not the best of criminals. My crime, as I said, was, we also call it accident, recklessness. But I would like my crime to be ecstasy, a more than healthy appreciation of the manner in which my lover bent my legs over my shoulders in his pursuit of proximity to my golden hair. I'd like my conviction to reflect that. Why should it matter to the law what name to call me if they have me bound? A child never understands what a parent goes through to make a pattern. Since I didn't keep silent, it's the least they can do. Until a child is a parent. Until 3 springs come and the state erases me. It sounds like a form of punishment. Those almond trees, their bridal anxieties, those blossoming months, sweet months before harvest. But it's historical. So I'm just going to close by reading 2 new poems from a kind of untitled manuscript. And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and this person said, have you ever thought about writing poems while driving? And I said to this person, but that's impossible. You'd have like a wheel in one hand and you'd be riding with the other. And this person said to me, no, not while you were driving, just while you were in the car and someone else was driving. And somehow this idea was especially horrifying to me because I wouldn't be driving the car. And I can't quite figure out what that's about, but I realized lately how many poems I have, especially love poems, that have to do with driving. And I was born in the state of California. I was born in the West, and this may have something to do with it. So this poem is called Provisioning, and it's about a road trip. Provisioning. We were provisioning. I thought we needed more. The road black on either side in both directions until we arrived at a fragile junction, stop sign and supermarket. Each crossroads brings sustenance, holds an argument. We stopped at the grocery store for liquor. Almost letting ourselves be tired, we continued. The argument concerned the public and the private, where we should live. Snow descended on the windows of the vehicle, refraining, not accumulating rhythm. The wipers brushed all of it away toward one side and 2 ranges of mountains. The older hiding the base of the taller the kind that tempts a climber. I think my father made his peace with death on one of those peaks once. I think he has forgotten. We could finish the drive from Mexico against the backside of the Sierra in a day. I loved the names of those lonely places that we passed so much I felt ashamed to let my mouth linger over syllables. Adelanto. Nothing could convince me anything was fragile. I saw my breath against the windows toward the last pass, beginning with the chute that goes straight up toward the first trees of the bristlecone forest. Then the road turns topsy-turvy before it levels out, a mile-long tabletop summit. Anybody wants to speed there. If you do, you miss the single boot hung from a pine tree for no reason. After that, the road becomes a gully. You drove faster than I even noticed. I noticed. You kept going. We argued about where we should love. Beauty must be witnessed to exist. I took the opposite position. I took the side of the icicle melting at midnight on a day when work had taken it out of everyone sweet enough to notice it. We stopped looking at each other. I know your cheekbone and your forehead by the argument they make. Right now, it is 2 winters later, January, a fragile domesticity. I have no idea what to eat. 2 winters. We continued into the valley. We mended the argument. The cows bedded down in the frozen sage with their identical animal children. You opened a cold beer. The cat had missed me. The owl found a visible shelter in spite of 2 handfuls of snow collecting in the juncture, 2 cottonwood branches made into a perch by their separation from a trunk whose isolate location made the owl easy to see. 2 in the morning, you didn't want to touch me. The next day, you wanted to do everything. The last poem I'm going to read is going to appear in the Fashion Tea magazine section of the New York Times a week from Sunday. So go pick up a copy of the New York Times if you like it. And it's from a series of poems I've been writing that are sort of extended commentaries on... there are a lot of commentaries on the Gospel according to Matthew already, but this poem is the first in a series of my own poetic commentaries on the Gospel according to Matthew. Thanks for listening. Self-help. The eye is the lamp of the body, so I tried to make a world where all I ate was light. Butterflies complete a similar labor in the summer garden, beating their wings slowly like a healthy person, the kind who runs for fun, could run from an attacker, eats greens in the same quantity as the salty meats the storytelling part of us appears to favor. I couldn't decide whether I wanted to stay alive or wanted to go faster. They appeared to contradict each other. I tried in all I did to eat light. I left the argument about the difference between a slave and a servant on the table. Though I think what I think is that consent to servitude is as much a fiction as a butterfly having a nervous breakdown because of the beauty of the lavender. The longer your hunger takes to find a shape, the longer you can hold it. Consider the butterfly, only at rest in the middle of consumption, but even then practicing for departure, for disappearance, closing in the middle of a landscape. Trying to manage a world in which all you eat is light is difficult. Labor and the lungs should be like wings of the butterfly, beating, closing slowly, the moonlight tensing the edge of each, almost lifting the edge of each toward the middle distance. So all that I consume can make me healthy, illuminate my throat and the inner state of my digestive tract with what a butterfly's been swimming in.
Thank you so much, Katie, for that wonderful reading. I'm David Holdeman. I'm the chair of the English department, and it's my honor, on behalf of the College of Arts and Sciences and the UNT Department of English, to present you with the 2014 UNT Rilke Prize, which takes two components. Part one is this lovely green medal. I'm going to put it around your neck if I can. The second part, which is actually somewhat cooler, is this check. So there you go. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
All right, and one last piece of business. We have something here at UNT called the Vortman Academy of American Poets Prize. This is our second year that we've offered it, and it's a prize for a poem by a graduate student in the creative writing program here. And this year, Katie served as our judge, and she chose a poem called August by Chelsea Wagner. And I'd like to bring up Chelsea now so we can give her this fine and fancy green gizmo, and so that she can hear some applause. So, yeah, Yeah, no, that was a challenge. That was a challenge. All right, so thank you, everybody, for coming. And please buy books, bring books up, get books signed, and come up and meet our poet. So thank you all.